Herb. Herb is a plant. I mean, herbs are good for everything. Herb.
Hello, you made the trip to the Eugene Cannabis TV show. We've got some news for you. This is all the Oregon information tonight. Sometimes we talk about things out of state, but boy, we've got plenty happening right here in the state of Oregon. So first we start off with the big busts down in southern Oregon, Medford area. The DEA, this time it really was the feds. A lot of times people say, oh, the DEA busted us, but they're just saying, just using DEA like saying clinics for tissues. No, but this case, it really was a DEA. DEA, here it says, Gold Hill, Oregon. Hundreds of marijuana plants were pulled out of the ground in Gold Hill Tuesday afternoon. More than 9 truckloads were driven off, full of what some call their medication. Now all of it is property of undercover federal investigators. It blows my mind why they would do something like this, Ashley Morgan, a medical marijuana grower, said. Families, people that work for a living, I don't know. The investigation began around 9 a.m. at a property off Old Stage Road. The renters who live and grow there were confused. Ashley Morgan lived on the property and had 45 plants. She said there were 4 different houses on site and everyone had their own crop. She thought everything was legal until this morning. She said she woke up to a gun in her face and investigators handed her a search warrant. Morgan said she was in handcuffs for 6 hours while their home was searched, but no charges were filed. They kicked in everybody's doors in here, rampaging through the walls like there were some criminals or something, Morgan said. All we are is Oregon medical marijuana patients. Some of the patients showed up mid-search. Amber Stefloon was one of them. She was in shock and now has nowhere to get her medicine. I broke my back, right leg, dislocated my shoulder, she said. I take the medication instead of narcotic medication. I don't see what the issue is. I came here and it's all ripped out of the ground. The half-dozen investigators on scene gave no explanation. We've been executing federal search warrants today, Jody Underwood with the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency Administration said. By 7 p.m., the search was over and the garden where hundreds of 10-foot tall marijuana plants were ripped apart. The fences were broken and the growers were left at home with unanswered questions. Another story, same thing, this talking more about it. 30 law enforcement officials with various federal, state, and local agencies served a warrant on the property Tuesday morning. The site is a large cooperative medical marijuana garden where a handful of providers grow for people with marijuana cards. So this is according to Alan St. Pierre, the National Organization to Legalize Marijuana, and federal agents must regularly bust medical marijuana growing sites in California and Washington. So again, it's the feds that are starting to come after the medical marijuana grower. Prior to this, we always thought that medical marijuana growers were relatively safe as long as they kept their quantities down. It's a common fact that the DA doesn't prosecute for less than 99 plants. But now here's a case of the first one we known in Oregon. Not really the first, but one of the first. The case of the feds actually confiscating a state medical marijuana garden. The last case was by a guy by the name of Stubblefield. He and his roommate were both patients. They were well under the number of plants that they were authorized. The state officers there were going to let them go, but they had a DEA agent happened to be accompanying them, and he said, well, it's not legal federally, and so I'm taking them. And he did, and they never charged the patient. And that's what they do. That's one of the tactics they use, is they go ahead and raid, and then they just sit on it and don't do anything. If they have up to, I've forgotten, 6 years or something to file charges, and they could sit around for 2 or 3 years, and you think it's all over, done with, and they forgot about it, and all of a sudden, bang, they come down on the charges, and here you go. So, land of the free, it's pretty disgusting, but that's what's happening in Southern Oregon. And then statewide, we have the state decided that the Oregon Medical Marijuana Program was a really good cash cow. They were making money already on the program, over and above the money that they've collected for, over and above what they needed to run the program. They've taken and put it in other places in the budget. So, again, the state of Oregon is making money on the backs of the patients. Well, that wasn't good enough. Now they decided they're going to increase the fees so they can make even more money, regardless of what it does to the low-income people. Just to give you an idea of the increase, the old fee structure, a card for a regular patient was $100. If you were on Oregon Health Plan or on food stamps or SSI, it was $20. That's per year. Now the new schedule is new cards or renewals are $200. So there's your 100% increase to begin with, just for that. And then if you're an Oregon Health Plan or food stamps, then now you get it for $100 instead of $200, like a regular patient. So that's went up from 20 to 80. I mean, from 20 to 100. And then the replacement. This is the real catcher. The replacement card fee. Now, if you lose your card in the past, it was free, no problem. Well, now they come up with this story about how people are getting replacement cards and giving them to their friends so they can use them. So it's arbitrarily decided that now they're going to charge $100 for a lost card. And then, all of that isn't bad enough, then if you want to have a grower on your grow site other than the patient, that's another $50. So it's quite disgusting, actually. The fee raise comes through a Senate bill which raises the possibility of lawsuits from patient advocates. Revenue bills are the job of the House in an appropriations bill, but the Senate in a spending bill. The Senate openly admitted the purpose of raising the fees was to balance balance state budgets starving for funds, including the state's Clean Drinking Water Fund. But with an evenly divided House and an anti-tax atmosphere in this state, with high unemployment and no sales tax, legislatures decided the medical and marijuana fees were the most politically expedient way to raise money. Forcing sick and disabled people risking arrest for abusing state-sanctioned doctor-recommended cannabis seems to be not only foreseen by the Senate, but also a secondary goal of the fee increases. And again, that's the same thing. I agree. The legislature seems to be bent on making more criminals of us all. It shows in the seatbelt law. It shows in the cell phone law. It shows in the it just goes on and on. The speed limit law through schools, if you remember that fiasco a few years ago in the legislature, you know. So anyway, and now with this, there's going to be less and less people that are going to be able to afford the card, and they're just going to go without it. They'll be on the black market, and then they get caught, and they'll be in the legal system. Again, it's just to make more criminals of us all. I'm believing that more and more as time goes on. It's really quite disgusting. And the thing is, we fought the legislature all through legislature session. We went to Salem 3 times to testify and trying to, the law enforcement lobby trying to destroy or weaken the Oregon Medical Marijuana Program. We fought that back and fought them off. I thought we at least got through the year without losing ground, and then they turned around and blindsided us with this fee increase. So it's really quite disgusting. So that kind of thing, just stuff that makes me mad enough to really make me want to fight. And this, we have some weapons. We have 3 Oregon re-legalization initiatives that are currently in the works for the November 2012. So I'm going to run through them real briefly. We do need help gathering signatures, so this is the time to fight back. The first one is the Oregon Cannabis Taxation Act, 2012. This is one we spoke of before. This has been filed. People are gathering signatures on it. When it's passed, it will regulate the legal sales of marijuana to adults through state licensed stores, allow adults to grow their own licensed Oregon farmers to grow marijuana for state licensed stores and allow unlicensed Oregon farmers to grow cannabis hemp for fuel, fiber, and food. So that one's up gathering signatures now. They were paying for signature gatherers, however, they didn't get the money coming in they'd hoped to, so now it's completely volunteer basis. But and again, that's a good one to work on, gather signatures for now. The the OMPI, the Oregon Marijuana Policy Initiative 2012. This is a initiative that will change the Constitution, which is good and bad. It takes more signatures and it's harder to get passed, but the legislature can't mess with it once it's passed. That's the advantage of this. And so this in here, it says permits the private, personal, and possession, production of marijuana. So this again, legalization initiative, and this is the Oregon Marijuana Policy Initiative 2012. The third one is coming out of Portland, the Sensible Oregon 2012. This idea is to pass a law in the state of Oregon making cannabis laws the lowest level of enforcement. And Seattle did pass this, and they've done quite well with it. So now they're trying it statewide here in Oregon. So these three are coming. You'll be hearing more about them on the show, as well as you might be probably seeing a lot of us down gathering signatures and stuff. Our friend John Saggio came back with some really good write-up here on the 10 reasons why we should unify behind the OMPI. And I won't have time to read them on this show, so I'll have to do it next show. But really good points, excellent good points. So the thing is first of all, register to vote, and secondly, get connected, find out what's going on, and jump in there and help, because we definitely need help, and of course money. We always need money for these campaigns, but the thing is that most of us at least have time that we can put in and that kind of thing. So get a hold of us, any of the addresses you see on the show, and if you want more information on these things, so let us know. And if you want to just say no brochure, just get a hold of us again. And this is a good brochure for things that are happening cannabis-wide all over the Eugene area. So next time, so you can go down to the studios behind Sheldon High School on Monday night, 4 o'clock, and come by and say hi, see how the show works, and come on if you'd like. So you got Dank, sometimes known as Dan or Dank. I'll answer to either one. So thanks for being here this afternoon or this evening or this morning, whichever the case may be. And we'll see you next week.
Receptors, one of the densest receptors in the brain, most populated throughout the entire brain. Right into the brain. Look how hot that is. Wow. Right in the brain. But there's also cannabinoid receptors in the liver. Also, look at the bone marrow, the vertebral column, the ribs.
So how do you think what we're seeing here in this image, how does that relate to the experience of using cannabis?
Well, look at the amount of cannabinoid receptors in the brain. A lot of them. A lot of the effects of cannabis use are in the brain. Euphoria, as an anxiolytic, it dissolves your anxiety, or it can even cause your anxiety. So cannabis abusers or cannabis users talk about having this high, the euphoria, that's potent in the deep structures of the brain.
Scientists are now experimenting to see which parts of the pot plant, including its cannabinoids and other biological compounds, might be the most effective against a variety of diseases, including diabetes and cancer. Despite all the difficulties, there's a group of doctors in the U.S. and abroad who have been advancing the research on the medical use of cannabis with highly impressive and sometimes revolutionary discoveries.
In a scholarly cancer review article published in 2009, there were over 421 chemical compounds identified in the cannabis plant. And within this group of natural substances, there are many chemicals that have significant anti-tumor properties at low enough doses to where they would be effective cancer treatments. That's an important part of this. It's one thing to be able to kill a cancer cell, but could you really survive such a treatment?
A botanist from the University of Colorado Springs branch, Robert Mellamede, who has written an article sort of comparing the carcinogenic effect of cannabis with tobacco and explaining why he thinks that cannabis has the anti-cancer effect for lung cancer.
There's nothing else that impacts on so many of our illnesses. You see, when I talk about these age-related illnesses, We're all aging, but we don't all come down with cardiovascular disease. We don't all come down with autoimmune disease. We don't all come down with cognitive dysfunction. We don't all come down with cancer. But the chances are we're going to come down with one of them. All right? And here we have this one drug that's able to help us holistically with our biochemistry to restore balance. You know, cannabinoids kill cancer cells in many cases. People are not aware of that. They think cancer, cannabis, anti-nausea. It's way beyond that.
There are also studies taking a look at other organ systems that have found that marijuana seeks out the cancerous cells and preferentially kills them over the healthy cells.
There's a wealth of laboratory evidence that these anti-tumor properties kill cancer cells in a variety of ways. There are multiple mechanisms of action identified by which cannabis kills cancer cells, and they're divided into various categories. And among these are anti-proliferative effects. Normally, that's one of the hallmarks of a cancer cell, is that it just keeps reproducing. So if you stop the reproduction, that's an anti-proliferative effect. There are anti-angiogenesis effects, and this means that the cannabinoids will stop the tumor from being able to elaborate or grow new blood vessels to support the growth of the tumor. There are anti-metastatic effects, and that is simple enough to mean that the cannabinoids block the ability of the cancer cells to spread into other tissues. And there's another effect that has a wild name, apoptotic effect. Apoptosis refers to the ability of cannabinoids to speed the death of the abnormal cells. And that's something that is especially important in cancer, because you're able to hasten the death of the cell without disturbing the normal cells around it.
Seth Research Laboratories in California have recently demonstrated that in some tumors, cancer cells are killed by marijuana, while the other healthy cells are left untouched. Cells that stop moving and become still white dots are dead cancer cells. The ability of cannabinoids to kill bad cells while protecting healthy ones is particularly important when we're talking about brain cancer because of the so-called blood-brain barrier. The brain has to be sheltered from outside influences that might hitch a ride on the bloodstream and cause havoc. What is exciting and unique about cannabinoids is that they can pass through the blood-brain barrier because of their slippery, fat-loving nature. Cannabinoids get right into the brain's cancer cells by moving easily through the cell's membranes, which are also composed of lipids. The evidence is piling up in mice-infested labs that the endocannabinoid system, when stimulated by cannabinoids, has an anti-tumor effect and can instruct cancer cells to commit suicide.
This was done by Manuel Guzman's group within the past less than 10 years, and what they showed there was that originally that THC, when injected into a brain tumor in mice and rats, a significant number of those animals, the tumor would regress and disappear, so that you actually had survival of rats that would otherwise die. And they examined all the surrounding nerve tissue, and that was all fine, because remember, once again, cannabinoids protect nerves.
Dr. Manuel Guzman is a professor of biochemistry and molecular biology in Madrid, Spain, and is known for his groundbreaking studies on medical cannabis.
Hemos observado que los cannabinoides tienen un efecto inductor de la muerte de las células tumorales, un efecto inhibidor de lo que es el crecimiento, la multiplicación de las células tumorales. Lo que hacen es disminuir el crecimiento de los tumores.
If cannabis might be the miracle cancer cure that everybody's been searching for, then why don't doctors everywhere know about it?
People have a hard time believing that cannabis can have all of these fantastic effects that are described. But what we're doing is we're just stimulating a natural system that's already there. This has been developing for hundreds of millions of years. The invertebrates, the sea squirts, the hydra, there are primitive endocannabinoid systems in those organisms, dating back 600-700 million years ago. The cannabis plant came along maybe 50 or 60 million years ago.
Why aren't billions in funds being directed toward cannabinoid research by the organizations that raise money for cancer therapies?
We're talking about medical research that, it's really a double-edged sword. On the one hand, I'm thrilled that there's really more research taking place now really than any time in history when it comes to the therapeutic use of cannabis, and specifically the cannabinoids, the components in cannabis. Unfortunately, a lot of that research is still relegated to taking place overseas. We see a little bit now finally taking place in this country, but really the United States remains fairly well behind the curve when it comes to cutting-edge medical cannabis research.
It's very difficult to do research with cannabis, the plant product, because it's restricted in what research we can do with it.
Research on this area is in its infancy, and that is because the United States government has discouraged that kind of research both in the United States and elsewhere.
It's only an aromatic herb, yet almost every government in the world restricts or bans its use. In many countries, cannabis suppliers and even users can still be put in jail for life or even executed.
It's illegal in every. I mean, I think there are treaties that prevent anybody from accepting marijuana as a medicine. Now, recently, Canada, Spain, and the Netherlands have sort of broken from these treaties, but I think these things are bigger than just any single country's politics.
Despite these initiatives, we want to make clear that federal law still applies, and federal officials will continue to apply the law, and DEA officials will review cases, as they have, to determine whether to revoke the registration of any physician who recommends or prescribes so-called Schedule I controlled substances.
Why does the corporate media continue to connect marijuana only with gangs, violent drug dealers, and society's losers, and not the growing numbers of doctors and scientists who are discovering its benefits? It is true that for those who use it regularly, pot can change your way of thinking, and it can make people question why they should continue to do things that aren't making them happy.
I like smoking marijuana. It calms me down. I just feel totally at ease. Everybody knows me. Smoke a little marijuana, Tom, you'll be great. Everything's gonna be fine, yeah? Corporate world made me stressed. Extremely stressed. Totally stressed. I am so happy I'm out of the corporate world. It's amazing.
In essence, grass can make you feel that the past and the future are not as important as the present. It has the potential to alter the very nature of consciousness by opening up the mind to unpredictable possibilities. That doesn't sit well with those who insist on remaining in control.
It's a very simple reality. Marijuana leads to doing worse things. That's just a fact. I don't care what anybody says, what the debate is.
We've heard that for years, that it's a gateway drug. What do you say to that, Congressman Paul?
Well, I think that's silly. Probably the most addicted drug in the country and in the world is alcohol. So if you're a consistent person and you think the government should be regulating personal behavior, you have to be for prohibition of alcohol. And when you look back and throughout history and what happened to that was a total disaster. It created the Al Capones.
If you look at the total disaster that's happened with medical marijuana, anybody in the United States can go to California and go find a doctor and buy the marijuana, and simply marijuana is not medicine.
Cannabis is a natural substance and therefore can't be patented. Anyone with a green thumb can grow it, and so its production could be in the hands of the people, not the corporations that run a $200 billion a year cancer business. It may not be a coincidence that pharmaceutical companies are silently preparing for what could easily become a total revolution in the curing habits of the world's population. GW Pharmaceuticals, a company that specializes in the study and commercialization of cannabinoids, has already established a full-cycle facility in an undisclosed location in the south of England, where they oversee the cultivation of the plant right to the finished medical product.
Growing areas?
This facility grows 30 to 60,000 plants every year. Once the marijuana is ready for processing, it undergoes the same exact treatment for extraction and refinement that is forbidden to regular citizens around the world.
Amazingly, GW Pharmaceuticals, who is this company that has 6 greenhouses in a secret location in the south of England, and each greenhouse has a different strain of marijuana in it. Each greenhouse has 10,000 plants in it. Each of the plants is a clone of the other. So they've standardized this stuff. Now, their product was approved for sale in Canada for treatment of multiple sclerosis, the muscle spasm, and the pain related to that.
And this is a spray.
This is an under-the-tongue spray. And the reason they went with the spray was they felt that they would have a hard time getting by the regulators if they had people smoke it.
In the United States, things are moving fast as well.
Breast cancer kills more than 41,000 American women every year. Researchers in the San Francisco lab are working to shrink that number, and they're doing it with an unusual weapon, marijuana, or at least a compound from it.
What we found is that this compound called cannabidiol was particularly effective at inhibiting aggressive breast cancers.
I have a lot of faith in pharmaceutical companies and their ability to make money. And I think that if you take a look at what's going on now, first off, you've got an awful lot of basic science that's going on in regards to cannabis and cannabinoids. And some of this research is being paid for by pharmaceutical companies.
We know that this compound extracted from cannabis is non-toxic in patients because it has already been used for different kinds of disease.
The benefits may not stop there. Scientists say the cannabis compound may fight other aggressive cancers, including prostate cancer. The next step, animal studies and clinical trials. So it may be several years before patients may benefit from a cannabis cancer fighter.
Cannabis contains 421 chemicals, more than 60 of which are cannabinoids. Cannabinoids are a unique class of compounds not found anywhere else in nature. A colorful plant with antioxidant activity, cannabis is subject to few predators and has even been utilized as an insect repellent.
It's quite an amazing spectrum of compounds that are in that plant. And what's so unique and incredible about them is they are touching on this incredible system that pervades all of us and regulates everything from, I tell people, cradle to grave, because it's in mother's milk.
Another stress to which pot plants are subject results from their daily exposure to the radiation produced by ultraviolet sunlight. This has created certain unique defenses in cannabis.
Why would this plant have evolved THC, this psychoactive compound? What was the reason for the cannabis plant?
I consider that accumulation of THC give a lot of privilege to cannabis. For example, this plant very resistant to ultraviolet. Extremely.
So it's like a defense against ultraviolet light at this altitude?
Yes.
The same chemical that protects the plant may well have a preventative anti-cancer effect inside the human body, since THC and other cannabinoids are scavengers of disease-causing free radicals.
What our cannabinoid system is evolved to do over many hundreds of millions of years has been to protect us from those kinds of imbalances, to restore the kind of health that we need. And because of our environment in particular, and because we are living longer, we need to be able to adapt very rapidly today. And we can't do that on an evolutionary scale. The way for us to do that as people, as intelligent people, is to make sure we're eating good diets, stay away from toxins, and eat these essential fatty acids, and when necessary, consume cannabinoids.
Modern medicine, under the pharmaceutical-based paradigm, has been looking for targeted therapies. So instead of looking for a medicine that could treat nausea, vomiting, loss of appetite, depression, pain, anxiety, we look for something that can block, this enzyme inside the cell's membrane. And so that's, what we're taught is medicine. The other things are considered snake oil. Anything that can do that many things that effectively makes people a little bit leery.
There are 4 cannabinoid compounds that are of the most interest to scientists doing medical research. Delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC, is the principal psychoactive ingredient that creates euphoria in the smoker. THC exerts a wide spectrum of biological effects by mimicking the body's own natural endocannabinoids.
If you look in the microscope there, you'll see sort of some glistening golf ball-like structures. And those are the glandular trichomes in the inflorescence of the plant, which contain all the chemicals that we're interested in for making medicine.
Probably one of the most fascinating cases is a gentleman with the glioblastoma multiforme brain tumor. Very deadly tumor. This tumor, from diagnosis, untreated, the average survival is just 3 months. Fully treated with radiation, surgery, and chemotherapy is about 12 months. So this gentleman is a middle-aged man who began using cannabis at the time of his diagnosis. He's been very consistent in using cannabis on a multiple-time daily basis now for 7 years without any signs of recurrence.